Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For today's card I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm using some of the die and the stencil from the Simon Says Stamp October 2021 card kit, and we're going to do something different for me. I'm sure it's not the first time this has been done, but I wanted to make use of the stencils with all the speech bubbles on it. Now they go really well with the stamp set that comes in the card kit, but I wanted to do something totally different. So I'm going to start off by using a piece of sort of, I suppose like a Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. And then I'm going to mask off where I want the speech bubble that I want to use in the top right corner. And I'm going to take the Distress Oxide ink, because it's kind of a combo of pigment and dye ink. So it will stay wet for longer. I'm going to use that. I'm going to ink it on and ignore what I do in a second. You don't need a powder tool for this. I don't know what I was thinking when I did that. Do not need it. Probably didn't need to even, just don't do that bit. But I'm just using the a blending brush and the Oxide ink and just blending it onto just around the edges and getting some colour on there. And because this ink will stay wet for longer, because of that pigment property in it, I can then put the Rustic Wilderness embossing glaze over the top and emboss it, heat emboss it. So this, I might not have had enough ink first of all, and I'm not worried about this because it's not going to be a solid like coverage, if you know what I mean. So although it doesn't completely cover it, because some of the ink in the sort of less inky areas will be starting to dry off already, it does stick to some of it, which is great. And then the other part of that I like about the glaze is that whatever colour's underneath, it will kind of take on that, or sort of it takes on that colour in a way, if that makes any sense. So it's very cool. It's a totally different thing to a a regular embossing powder. So when I heat set this, unfortunately my heat tool's obviously a bit vicious, and it blew half that powder off, even though I started heating it from the back. So I think I will just stick to heating it from the back, or I will use the other heat tool, the Ranger one, which is the same like intensity of heat, but it just blows sort of much slower. So it does take longer, but it's fine. And I really like this because this is a Halloween card. It doesn't matter that it's not completely perfect. It doesn't have to be anyway, but it sort of kind of lends itself. And also by using the Rustic Wilderness glaze, it kind of picked up the brown tones in the cardstock. So that was kind of a neat thing in the end. So I'm going to use the speech bubble to put the stamp that says, "Let's get smashed." Which is from the Monster Reunion stamp set from Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous. And I'm also going to use the Friend die. Now, what I did, and I thought I was being clever, but obviously not, is at the back of the card, cardstock, when I die cut it, I actually put a piece of like masking tape after I'd taken some of the sticky off, thinking that would be easy for them to stay together. It stayed together too much, and I'll have to recut the orange piece. I had to make a plan with it because it just would not come off the back of the pieces. Some of them I can't even get out of the cardstock, so, which you'll see I'll have to take a blade and just sort of trim or cut so that it's just the masking tape that hasn't cut through, basically. But I don't know, I think I was thinking it would just help to hold everything together, because this die has almost like an outline, and then of course the centers that it will cut out, you can then do some nice inlay technique with it, which is kind of what I was going for here, but it didn't quite turn out that way, but we will still make it work. So that's what I wanted to show you. So I'm using the black pieces. All of these have this tape at the back. I will just take the whole piece out. So the idea was that the outline would be in black, and the like inlaid pieces would be in this sort of peachy colour in the top left there. Because the tape literally, it almost glued it together. So when I tried to take the orangey one apart, it basically was tearing the piece of cardstock itself in half. It was like splitting the cardstock in half. So not working at all. So I had to, like I say, start again, but that's fine. So the black pieces, like I say, I'm going to put them as they are. I was thinking I would use where it die cut as a guide to where I wanted to put them. In the end, I don't. I just grab a ruler and sort of get it straight. You know me, I don't do straight lines, but kind of get it straight. And even here, I'm trying to get the backing off, and it won't play ball. So in the end, I just leave those as is and stick them down. Masking tape at the back and all. It is what it is. So the other way around that is maybe to use some double-sided sheet, or if you've got really wide double-sided tape, and put that on the back of the die cut, of the back of the cardstock, then die cut it. That might work, and it'd be easy to stick them down as well, or easier because it's already got sticky on it. But yeah, this didn't work. I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, so the peachy color that I wanted for this card, I didn't have that same peachy color, of course. I'd run out of it, obviously. So I grabbed another piece of a Cajun Craze color from Stampin' Up, and I used that instead. So it's a much darker orangey color, but it's still got that orangey red sort of tone going. So it was all right in the end. So I'm sticking all of these down somewhat straight because they're not actually straight, even though I'm using a ruler, but never mind. And just something else to note is that when you're, like I stamped the pumpkin on the top half of the speech bubble, the words that underneath it, like the sentiment that says "let's get smashed," it kind of, you have to be aware that when you've got embossing glaze or embossing powders, it will resist ink, unless it's a permanent ink. It will kind of resist it. So, and especially if it's a dye ink. So what I found was that the first part of the word "let's" kind of gets lost behind the embossing glaze, which is kind of a cool thing. So like from the image of the pumpkin, that's kind of cool because it kind of like part of him is behind some of that glaze, which is nice. But obviously as the sentiment goes, I probably could have stamped that separately onto another piece of cardstock and then just stuck it on as like a block text, like I do sometimes as well. So I recut it, like I said, in Cajun Craze. So it's not the orangey, like bright orange that I was kind of going, or not bright orange, but like peachy color that I was going for initially, which I thought I might also do some ombre, sort of inking the bottom half of it in a darker orange or red, just for a different effect. Obviously it didn't turn out that way, so we're just gonna go with this. So this isn't inlay as such because it's now sitting on top of the inside pieces of the word friend, but it is more dimensional, but it still looks cool. So going from one thing to totally different, it's still worked out quite cool. So I'm still happy with it, but it just wasn't quite what I was expecting. So just all these pieces now, and now that I've cut it out without anything out the back of it, they all come apart really easy. And also to the left there's the outline pieces, so you could easily keep those and put that on a card because all the pieces are there. It will still give you that illusion, you know, that sort of outline of the word friend, so you can easily use that for a different card. So right, sentiment, yay. So for the next part, I'm going to use some ink for a couple more of the characters from that same stamp set. And I decided that Dracula was the one who was going to be chatting. So he's the one, and that's saying, you know, let's get smashed. And I was going to use the mummy to start with because these hands are together, kind of like he's going, yes, please, let's go drinking. But I decided that actually Frankenstein kind of looks kind of cool next to him instead. So we got Frankenstein and Dracula going for a drink. I mean, you know, why not? So, yeah. So I stamped them on with the same ink. So that was Versafine Onyx black ink. And then I'm going to colour them in with some Prismacolor pencils. This is a set of 24. I've had them for a long time. I don't do an awful lot of pencil colouring because I'm just not that good at it. So I yeah, I just don't do a lot of it. So this is very simple colouring, nothing too difficult. But I am going to try and get some shading on. Now the nice thing about these stamps is that they've already got a lot of the detail in the stamp is shading and, you know, like texture and things like that. So you don't have to do an awful lot when you come to colouring these images because there's tons of that on there already. You just kind of have to add the colour so it kind of gives that illusion of shading, and then the texture or the design just adds to it and makes it even more lovely. So yeah, really easy to colour in, to be honest. But I'm just not a pencil person. I have a couple of types of pencils. I have the Prismacolors, and I have a small set of the Polychromos, which are a much harder pencil than these. But again, I'm not a huge pencil. I just don't colour with it an awful lot. I probably should, because this was kind of fun. And it also leaves like a bit of a sheen on the card. So again, it's just another bit of something interest on your card. So for the pumpkin, I used a brown, a green, and a couple of shades of orange. I'm not going to have the colour names for the pencils because I think I'm not, you know, that's more personal, whereas things like I kind of just winged this bit because I'm not like au fait with pencil colouring, but you guys know that if I can give you colour names and things, I will do that. But I didn't even take note when I did these, but it's a set of 24 Prismacolors, so it's the colours from that set if you have that. And then for Dracula, I used one of the sort of, it's like a pale skin tone kind of colour. It's like a really pale pinky sort of colour for his skin, because I figured he's dead, so he's like the living dead, so he's not exactly going to have any real colour to his face. And then he got a purple and a red outfit. And then for Frankenstein, I decided he had to be green for some reason. I can't remember what colour he's supposed to. Is he normally green? I can't remember. Anyway, so he was green. And then I just literally used some of the same colours I'd already used on like on Dracula to, you know, colour his outfit in. And to get some of the extra texture, I either used a slightly darker colour, so I had one lighter, one darker, or not texture, like a shading, that's the word. Or I just picked up, started off with a light hand, and then where I thought I might want some of that shading to be darker, just then went over it again with the same colour. So you don't need, I've only got 24 of them, but you don't need 24. You could, if you had a set of 12, you could do the same thing and still get some nice shading going on. She says, even though she's not not okay with this. So like on the arms, on the sleeves, I start off with a light colour, a light colouring of it, and then I will go back and just intensify the top part, because I figure that might be a bit darker up there. But I don't think of light sources or anything like that. And I will show you a close-up at the end of the video, as I always do with my card, so you can see it a bit better. And of course I have to ink everything within an inch of its life. So I'm taking the same Rustic Wilderness. So again, this showed you that you don't need a million colours. I feel like I have to have them all because I'm a bit of a collector, but you don't have to. So I'm using the same green that I've used for the speech bubble and then to ink around the edges. I also used a microfiber just on the speech bubble, because anywhere there's glaze or embossing powder, the ink will sit on top of it. So if you use paper towel will work too, and just gently go over that, and it just takes that ink off. And then scored a white card base. Now I'm loving my white card bases at the moment, but for this card there's no white on that main image panel, so for me I had to do something to the white base so it made sense, if that makes sense. So if there was a bit of white on the main card, it would be fine. I could have left it as it was, but there wasn't, so I had to incorporate another colour just to tone it down a bit, because you didn't want that stark white when nothing else is white. So there's no other white on there. Didn't make sense to me, so I had to do something. So I dragged out Cajun Craze ink, which my ink pad looks a bit muggy. I think I need new ink refills for it, but anyway. And it's the same colour as the word friend, the orangey colour there. So I just figured that was a colour that we've already got lots of green going on. So this around the edge with a finger dauber is what I used, would just be enough to tone down that white so it wasn't so stark. And then the other thing I do is there's some of the ink was sort of on the around the edges was a bit excess, if that makes sense. So I used my finger, best tool, used my finger and just grabbed that ink, excess ink, and just rubbed it, smeared it, whatever you want to call it, onto the white. And again, didn't have to be perfect, it's a Halloween card, but it just brought some of that colour onto the white and sort of toned it down a bit, if that makes any sense. So I could have done, you know, an ink blending around the edge and that would have been even more intense, but I quite like the way it looked. It just worked out quite nicely. And then that way you've got almost like a layered look, but it's not actually layered, if that makes sense. Which I quite like. So just popping it onto the card base with a standard A2 size card. You guys know I love making these this size card. And then one last thing I'm going to do, and I know it's you know spooky Halloween, but I'm going to add some. This is a clear, not Sakura, Spectrum Noir. It's like a sparkle pen. You don't have to do this. I just thought it was quite cool. But there's not a ton of sparkle on it. So there's enough for it to be a bit standy outy, if that makes sense. And then you've got the sort of shimmeriness or the shininess of the embossing glaze, which, like I said, didn't stick everywhere. So that's cool too. Do you know what I mean? And then you hopefully would have seen a little bit of the sheen that you get from the pencils as well. I actually really enjoyed this. It wasn't too difficult. I think I need to not be afraid of my pencils. That's the biggest thing here. So if there's a tool in your craft shed, drag it out. You know, if you're afraid of it, drag it out and use it. And I will see you next time. Bye.